I can hear my father saying to me, and I can hear myself saying to my son, you could have avoided so much grief and pain if you would listen and learn from my mistakes. But you were not willing. I can see my wife reaching out to hug our daughter, and she squirms away in embarrassment. Resistant, rebellious Jerusalem, knowing itself to be the child of God, yet insistent on finding its own way, marching to its own drum, making its own mistakes, some of them rather impressive, like killing the prophets. And as with rebellious children, you cry over them. Tears of frustration and fear for their future and your powerlessness to save them. And at the same time, you want to shake them and say, stop, you're hurting yourself. Yet it's difficult to condemn Jerusalem outright, and rightly so, because to look at Jerusalem is a little like looking in our own bathroom mirror. We can all make a list. Some of us, probably a long one, of the times and ways in which we have rebelled against God. That's nothing new to any of us. But what's interesting in this scene is the specifics about what is being resisted. In the text this morning, Jesus is lamenting that Jerusalem prefers to resist God's grace. Jerusalem does not want to be gathered in, sheltered and protected by God. And that seems rather astonishing until, once again, we realize that we can find the same thing by looking in the mirror. All too clearly, I can hear God lamenting over each of us. How often would I have gathered you to myself in a huge embrace, but you pushed me away? How often would I have sheltered you under my wing, but you insist on fighting your own battles? And why? Why do we resist? It's difficult to answer, not easy to admit, but many of us resist God's grace because we fear deep down inside that maybe we just don't deserve it. That God can be and should be good to everyone else, but we ourselves are just beyond hope. I can remember the first time I discovered that I was not the only person in the world who felt this way. I was taking part in a day-long retreat. What we were discussing was forgiveness, and as we were talking around our table, we discovered that every one of us found it easier to forgive other people than to forgive ourselves. And that we could more easily believe that God could forgive everyone else, terrorists and murderers and all that, more easily than we could believe that God would forgive each of us personally. We resist the grace of God because we feel unworthy to receive it. Everyone else, yes, you bet. God loves them, but me? What's so subtle about that is that a healthy sense of guilt is good for us. If we have sinned, we need to own up to it. We need to seek forgiveness and try to make the situation right again. The problem here is not so much guilt as it is shame. The two are similar. Maybe the easiest way to describe the difference is this. Guilt is the feeling that I did something wrong. Shame is the feeling I am something wrong. Most of us at least have a small dose of that, some of us a larger one. And for just a second, I want to share with you the story of Billy Ray Harris, who is a homeless panhandler in Kansas City. And it seems that a generous passerby dropped all of her change in his container one day and realized the next day that her engagement ring was in her change section of her purse the day she emptied it for Billy Ray. And she returned the next day and could not find him, and returned the next and the next, and then finally, one day, he was there. And she approached and told him that she thinks she gave him something that was precious to her. And he smiled and asked her if it was a ring. And she said yes. And he dug deep in his pocket and gave it to her. He had been offered $2,000 for it, but he knew it wasn't his, so he waited and was able to return it. No shame there. Billy knew that God loved him and that there is no shame in what he is, for he is gracious and pure in heart. Shame causes us to resist God's grace because God couldn't possibly want to be good to someone as unworthy as we are. We need to be healed of our shame. And we took that first step at our baptism many years ago. But we also need to remember that the whole point of grace is that no one deserves it. It is a gift offered to us all. Lent is a season of making renewed commitment to participate and be a part of the movement of Jesus in this world. We see that in the gospel from last Sunday, where Luke says that after the baptism of Jesus, he went into the wilderness there to be tempted by Satan. And there is a key phrase in that verse. There's a key word in that verse, and it is after. After the baptism. Baptism is the sacrament of the commitment to the Jesus movement. It is to be washed, if you will, in the love and reality of God, and to emerge from that great washing as one whose life is dedicated to living that love in the world. In a few moments, we will baptize Anderson Andrew. He will be washed clean, adopted by God, a grace-filled gift undeserved. And in future years, there will be times when Anderson will be resistant, have feelings of guilt or shame, but he will be a baptized child of God, fully loved and fully accepted, with no need for guilt or shame, for God protects Anderson and all of us, just as a hen gathers her brood under the wings and protects them. And thus, we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In this season of Lent, take time to focus on what God means for your lives. Whether this Lent you give up chocolate candy or take on a commitment to serve the poor or serve others in some new way, whatever it is, let that something be something that helps you participate in the movement of God's love in this world, following in the footsteps of Jesus. And the truth is, the fact that Jesus was baptized and began that movement in the world and immediately found himself tempted by the devil is an ever-present reminder that this movement is not without struggle. It is not easy. The truth is, this movement is difficult. It's hard work. It is work to follow Jesus to the cross. And it's work following Jesus to the cross through to the resurrection, to new life, to new possibility. That is our calling. That is the work of our movement. To help this world move from what is often the nightmare of the world itself into the dream of God.